took 4 days and 5 nights to reach the mountain compound. An ordinary man would have died attempting a solo climb to reach the home of Zaroff, but I was no ordinary man. It was like a warlord's castle, one which rivaled even the most fortified military compounds I'd ever seen or heard of. Looming spires towered above me, sharp enough to cut the sky in two. The Gothic structure seemed out of place on the lush mountain terrain, teeming with life. The home of Zaroff was a dead thing, a phantom with windows like madly staring eyes. I thought of my dear sister Lucy, feeling my blood boil as I approached the giant oak door. The knocker bore the image of a snarling wolf with the delicate shape of a young virgin dangling from its jaws. A dark, cloaked visage stared out at me from the open door. It was the largest man I'd ever seen in my life. His eyes were lost in the darkness of his hood, his mouth twisted in a permanent snarl. The giant's beard, braided, oiled, and heavy with ivory beads, fell well past his chest, and he stroked it as he looked down on me in a menacing silence. Without flinching, I cleared my throat and looked up at the giant. "My name's Rainsford. I'm here to see Zaroff the Hound. I'm sure your master will have heard of me. Take me to him. Now." That laugh. I'd heard it before, the last time I spoke with Lucy. When she telephoned for me that one last time, a shiver seized my backbone, but I wouldn't let it break my courage. I was determined to stand up to this giant and all the devil Zaroff cared to summon up from the depths of...
Don't pay any mind to Alexei. He is a simple creature, though physically he is quite the specimen to behold. Wouldn't you say, Mr. Rainsford?
The giant, called Alexei, stepped aside to reveal a figure who belonged more to a campfire tale than to the real world. I saw why Zaroff was called the Hound, though few who saw him lived to tell the tale. Zaroff was more wolf than man. The werewolf, while not quite at Alexei's stature, still had to look down to meet my gaze. He dressed like a sophisticated gentleman should, wearing the finest silk evening attire, a pipe slouching from his massive jaw. In one clawed hand he held a glass of port, in the other a book, the cover of which looked to be suspiciously bound in human flesh. The werewolf's fur was now peppered with the ghostly white of age. His teeth, while unnervingly sharp, were yellowed and chipped. He grinned down at me and handed the skin-covered novel to Alexei in order to offer me a friendly hand.
Very good to meet you at last, Mr. Rainsford. Very good indeed. It is not often that I meet a creature of your talents. I must say, I'm quite the fan. Lucy even gifted me with some of your delightful books. Won't you join me in the dining room? Your expedition on Everest was quite remarkable, I must say. You're a survivor. I like that. I like the way survivors think.
He turned to grin at me while he spoke, eyeing me more like his next meal than a guest. "Yes, well, thank you, sir. If I can, I'd like to discuss an urgent matter with you, one which I fear I cannot delay."
Later. We can discuss business after dinner, old sport. Your type is always in a hurry. Sit, eat, drink. Come and know my hospitality. We shall discuss how your sister has been enjoying her stay afterward.
Every second that passed felt like it could be my sister's last. In truth, I had no knowledge whether she was alive or dead. creature such as Zaroff would have no qualms about toying with me or my hopes. Even so, I had to play my cards right, or it would surely mean Lucy's death. I forced a smile and a polite bow of the head. I took a seat beside Zaroff at the dining room table. Zaroff rang a small bell, which prompted a series of robed figures to bustle into the room, filling the tables with an impressive assortment of food. Roast pheasant, wild boar, smoked shadfish, and steak, underdone to perfection, surrounded by a variety of stewed root vegetables and wild mushrooms. Cheeses and crusty loaves of bread sat beside that, and before I could turn it down, a goblet of red wine was served to me by one of the mysterious figures. I eyed them closely, hoping in vain to see my sister in the crowd, but even if she was standing at my elbow, I would not have known. Every servant of Zaroff was hidden beneath long, flowing cloaks. Their faces were lost in inky seas of darkness beneath their hoods. They all filed out as the last platter was set before us. When it was just the two of us once more, Zaroff began to speak, loading his plate with steaks fried rare. He preferred the rarest cuts, of course.
Please, indulge, Mr. Rainsford. Your journey must have been a brutal one. It isn't any man who can reach my compound, after all. Not without my assistance. I'm impressed.
Tell me, Zaroff, you know so much of me, yet I know so little of you. Lucy's very sparing with the details of her life. How did you come to be here, and in your unique condition, no less?
I was a hunter, you see, a famed one at that. There was not a beast in this world that I could not take down. Lions and rhinos in Africa, not to mention wild boar and grizzlies all over North America. You name it, I've killed it, and killed it well. I've been particularly gifted in the area of hunting ever since I was a child. But I grew bored. Imagine the terror one feels when the thing you love most no longer satiates your thirst for life. I had almost given up hope until one lucky day I came across a very clever werewolf.
Rumors of Zaroff's condition varied, though most chalked it up to a medical condition or some strange affliction brought about by an exotic disease. But no, I knew the truth. There are beings that we humans are never meant to see, who dwell in the places we are not meant to tread. Old forests, deep oceans, and most of all, the mountains. I'd seen my fair share of the unexplainable. Zaroff was nothing new.
Now, this man-beast was not like myself. He saw his condition as a weakness that only had to be endured once a month by the light of a full moon. He lived at the edge of a forest, the village hermit they called him, in a tiny Russian village whose name I can't recall for the life of me. He avoided almost all human contact and lived a simple life. But he was cunning, quick, and deadly. As soon as I discovered his true nature, the thrill of the hunt was ignited in me once more. So I killed him. It wasn't easy. It was the fight of my life. And by the end of it, the damned thing took a piece of me with him. You see that chunk of meat? All gone. That was the beast's last supper. I won the hunt, and I lived, but at a cost. I was terrified that my hunting days were over, and I would be the prey. Humans don't take to my kind. I was as good as dead. But with every full moon I became stronger. Felt more like myself than ever before. My senses were enhanced to an extraordinary degree. My strength and power immeasurable. Soon I couldn't bear to take my human form any longer. Do you know there is a way to stay in your beastly form once you are turned? Are you familiar with how one goes about securing such permanency in this condition? No? Magic, old sport, dark magic, blood magic. With such power, one can achieve anything they desire.
And so you use some satanic ritual to keep yourself in your werewolf form? Then what? Amassed other followers of blood magic for a cult of your very own?
Call it what you will. Power is power. No matter if it's God or the devil that gives it. It's all the same to me. My followers know this and are honored to serve me here. Your darling sister is, of course, one of my most devoted acolytes.
And where is she, then? Lucy, I mean. May I see her? Zaroff's smile never faltered, the eerie shadow of it haunting his muzzled face.
Why don't you join me on a hunt tonight? It's tradition, you see. Humans aren't as challenging as other werewolves, but they are still such a thrill. Each full moon, if one of my servants requests to leave my home forever, they may do so, for a price. They volunteer to be hunted. If they win, they are free to go. But if I win, they stay in my trophy room forevermore.
Thank you for your hospitality, but I think I should be leaving with my sister. Now. Something flashed across Zaroff's eyes, though I couldn't decipher what it was. Anger, perhaps? Excitement? I did not know, nor did I wish to find out.
I insist you rest here tonight and enjoy all the comforts that my most humble residence can provide. Do sleep well, for your mother's sake. For tomorrow at dawn, you will set out on foot, and by mid-morning, I shall begin the hunt. If you win, you and Lucy both shall be free. And if not...
All right. We have a deal. That night, as I lay awake in my bed, I thought of poor Lucy. Lucy, who'd been seduced by the evil Zaroff. For something in his nature made him irresistible to women, and men, given the bevy of young Apollos also serving as his acolytes. Even without my thoughts of Lucy, Lucy, who was now drowning in a life of the dark arts, too scared to admit she needed help, I would have had difficulty sleeping, for in the distance, Zaroff hunted his next unlucky victim. A piercing shriek and a blood-curdling howl marked the end of the game. Zaroff was victorious once more, and maybe come tomorrow he would be again. I awoke just before sunrise and prepared for my journey. Breakfast had been brought to my room while I was resting, still hot. Rations and a water canteen had also been left out for me, along with some very basic bushcraft supplies. I'd begun my descent down the mountain, through the forest-like terrain that surrounded the compound. I made sure to mask my scent with a good layer of earth and whatever animal scat I could find, anything that would throw off my scent. I traveled in a serpentine path, doubling back several times to muddle my tracks. Everything I did was with the intention of throwing Zaroff off my trail, yet somehow he managed to find me. In the distance, I heard him approaching. Zaroff made no show of being a silent stalking predator. He wanted me to know he was near. With nowhere to run, I scaled my way up the tallest tree I could find, tucking myself out of sight amongst its thick foliage. I waited. Not 5 minutes later he appeared, bestial, naked down to his wolf's coat. He sniffed this way and that, until finally pointing his snout upwards. He grinned, though he could not see me hiding in the boughs of that tree. He knew I was there all the same.
I think I shall retire for the afternoon. You've done a fine job so far, if I may say so. We shall continue after lunch.
Once I was certain he had gone, I clambered back down the tree and continued my descent of the mountainous lands of Zaroff. For all my efforts, he had still found me so easily. I had to do more. I needed to be better. I decided setting traps would be in my best interest. As I stopped for the evening, I gathered branches and sharpened them with a flint knife. Once I had a fair amount, I dug out a pit, lining the fresh hole with the stakes and hiding it with fallen leaves and grass. Then I hid and waited. Just as the sun began to lower in the sky, I heard it. The crunch of heavy footsteps. I made sure to stay perfectly still, waiting in the husk of a fallen tree, barely daring to exhale. And then it happened. A tearing of flesh and bone and an ungodly scream that shook the ground around it. But there was also another sound, the voice of Zaroff himself.
Such a shame. You've taken my Alexei from me. He's a rare breed, but the hunt must continue. I shall return tonight. No more games. Just you and me, Mr. Rainsford.
The sound of Zaroff's footsteps receding into the distance made my blood boil. I emerged from my hiding spot to find the giant in my homemade booby trap, his eyes wide and fearful as he met his end. There would be only one way to win against Zaroff. I'd have to kill him with my hands. Countless other bodies lay rotting like landmarks against the mountainside. It reminded me of Everest, one of the corpses on Zaroff's mountain, now a moss-crusted skeleton, had something shiny resting just beneath it. I leaned down for a closer look and discovered short but thick silver chains. That's when it clicked. If Zaroff was truly a monster from the old legends, then Silver could defeat him, or at the very least wound him. I grabbed the silver chains and placed them in my satchel, pressed forward. As the moon rose high into the night, I waited for Zaroff on the lower mountain cliff. No more running. No more playing games. I would kill him and finally bring my sister home.
Surely you don't mean to fight me.
I pulled the silver chains out of my satchel along with the flint knife. He flinched at the sight of silver, and I knew I'd found his weakness. His cold yellow eyes filled with a quiet rage.
Very well. Have it your way, then.
He lunged towards me, but I moved at the last second, missing his claws by barely an inch. I swung the chains out, and they wrapped around his throat, hissing like vipers as they seared his flesh like a steak fried rare. He let out a painful howl, using the silver chains to pull me towards him. With the full force of his body, he threw me down to the ground. I felt the air leave my body at the shock of the fall, but fought on. We tumbled this way and that. He clawed at my face, and I sank my flint knife into his right eye and plucked it out. He slashed at my throat, and I squeezed the chains tighter around his neck, watching the silver burn layer after layer into the raw flesh of his neck. Just when I thought his strength was about to give out, Zaroff snapped his jaws at my arm, sinking his teeth into my battered flesh. I screamed and reeled backwards. I felt the venom of an ancient curse burning its way through my bloodstream, and heard the mocking laugh of Zaroff ringing in my ears.
Now, we are one and the same, old sport. Maybe I shall keep you after all. We can wait and face each other as equals. Winner can feast on the flesh of your delicious sister.
God damn you! I did the only thing I could think of to do. There was only one way to win against Zaroff the Hound. I ran to the edge of the cliff and threw myself off before the werewolf could stop me. But I was already far below him, dead and gone, or so he thought. What Zaroff overlooked as he stumbled home to his mountain fortress was just how good of a mountain climber I really was. If he had truly read my books, as he said, he would have known I had nearly fallen many times over my years of adventuring, but every single time I had caught myself. I found my footing, waiting for Zaroff's absence to begin my ascent up the cliff and back to the compound. My new werewolf blood had already increased my speed and stamina. For that much I was thankful. When I crept back inside the compound, I found my dear Lucy, though not as promised. There on the wall of his trophy room, stuffed and mounted like an animal, was the head of my dear sister. He had never intended to leave her alive. A rage like never before filled my body, and I waited behind the curtain in the darkness of Zaroff's chambers. I waited as he bathed and nursed his wounds. Waited as he ate and drank himself into a stupor. And waited as he stumbled into the bedroom. Only then did I emerge from the shadows. Zaroff looked as though he had seen a ghost, but quickly found his earlier charm. He grinned and held out a still bloodied hand.
Good, Rainsford, very good. You win. What excellent sport. You have bested and outsmarted me. Now you and your Lucy are free to go. So you have found her already, I presume. Very well then, let's finish this. Winner gets the compound, the servants, and this deliciously soft bed. Softest in the world. May the best werewolf win.
As I lay there that night with Zaroff's blood still on my hands and the delicious stench of a fresh kill still in the air, I couldn't help but agree with the old bastard. It really was the softest bed in the whole damned world.
What is the matter with you? Why on earth would anyone want to watch videos about homicide? Because you're obsessed and because you pass a construction site and wonder if there's any bodies buried underneath that foundation? You're a weirdo. Just like the rest of us here spilling that homicidal tea. What is up, YouTube? My name is Rainy B, and welcome to my channel, Homicidal Tea. This is a safe space to spill the tea on all things true crime. Just a bunch of true crimers looking for an entertaining spin on some pretty heavy subject matter. What you will get when you subscribe to my channel is a pure and unadulterated, authentic look at mostly unknown but all solved homicide cases, narrated by someone who is an empath to a fault and truly and genuinely feels for these victims and their families left behind. There's no better way to take the power back from these perpetrators than by making these videos victim focused, something that you will notice a lot around here. Something else you'll notice is I tend to use a lot of humor and memes to break up the tension.
Stop it. Get some help.
I really like making fun of the killers too, any chance I get, so I'll throw a nasty little dig in there. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel, and hopefully I'll see you in the comments on the next video. Bye!
Hey there, I'm Tara.
And I'm Jessica, and together we co-host the podcast 3 Spooked Girls.
If you love the paranormal
Or murder.
Join us on Mondays for full-length episodes where we discuss our favorite paranormal stories and true crime cases.
And join us again on Thursdays for our mini-sodes called Stabby Snippets, where we tell you all about true crimes happening in the news.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, wherever the hell else you listen to your pods at. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by using the handle @3SpookedGirls.
Come and hang out with us and get your spooky on while we scare the hell out of you.
The 3 Spooked Girls.
Last year, there were nearly 22,000 murders in the U.S. Not surprisingly, more than 200 true crime podcasts launch every year in the U.S. alone. There's no shortage of crimes and no shortage of crime podcasts to cover them, but none of those shows have the heart of our true crime podcast.
Thank goodness.
Well, hell, they didn't even have seatbelt laws back then.
He never wore seatbelt. Yeah, it's fine. He could not remember exactly what happened and thought that he had blacked out. That was about it. That's all he could tell officers.
No. He was drawing things saying the thoughts won't stop.
I want to see how this plays out.
It's heartbreaking.
Isn't it time you made our true crime podcast your true crime podcast? Our True Crime Podcast, available on all your favorite podcasting apps. I'm Edward October. For more true, true-ish, and classic tales of horror and the paranormal, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to ring the bell so you don't miss anything. Or find all of our links at octoberpodvhs.com. Octoberpod, retro horror for bold individualists.